Lately, life has been a series of things to do that are getting in the way of all my other things to do. But what I really want to be doing is reading this growing stack of books for fall, decorating my house and relaxing and enjoying some of my new DIYs like dried flowers. I know that in order to do all the things that I have to do in my daily life and to get to all the things that I want to do, preparation is key, and having a stocked pantry and a freezer full of meals would be incredibly helpful. But there are a few problems with that in my life. One, I am not great at keeping up with making freezer meals. Historically, I just don't do it. I talk about doing it and then I don't do it. But even more than that, I don't live on a homestead or a farm, so I don't have a huge cellar or a huge pantry or space for tons of freezers to stock all of that food. But what does work for me is making a batch of ingredients that I can then freeze and use for flexible cooking for the coming week or sometimes even months. And specifically, I like to make things that can be used together and combined in creative ways for flexible cooking, so it makes space in my mind and in my life for other things than thinking about what's for dinner every single night. On this day, I decided to make a batch of tortillas, and I'll link the recipe in the description box below, but what I do is I double the recipe. So that way, the recipe makes about 16 per batch, so that way I have 32 tortillas or flatbreads. You'll see in a little bit, they're actually more shaped like flatbreads than tortillas, but I have 32, which for my family of 3 is plenty. You can check out the recipe for these tortillas, or as I call them, flatbreads, in the link in the description box below. But you just mix the ingredients together, give them a good knead on a floured countertop, and then I wrapped it in a beeswax wrap, and you can let it sit for 20 minutes to 2 hours on the countertop. One of my favorite make-ahead ingredients that's also budget-friendly is bone broth. I do this all the time with rotisserie chicken because they're really cheap at the store, and then not only do you get the meat from it, but you can also make broth with it. This happens to be a turkey, but I just threw in garlic, some chopped onion, some leftover veggies that I had in the fridge, and then a couple bay leaves, and filled the pot with water, and then I let this simmer all day on the stove. As a busy mom, a homemaker, an English teacher, and a business owner, it is imperative that my kitchen projects and cooking does work for me while I can do other things. That's why I really lean on things like dough recipes that need rest time and bone broths that need simmer time so they can do their thing while I do mine. I recently published a video called 3 Ideas for Easy Cooking. I'll link it down in the description box below, but it echoes this same sentiment that the things we do in the kitchen should work for us, not against us. Because I was doing projects that required little of my hands-on time in this moment, I had time to head out to the garden and work on my fall greenstock vertical garden. And I even had a chance to finish up some canning projects that I had going on. Here are some candied jalapenos I had canned the night before. Making a batch of 32 tortillas or flatbreads definitely is labor intensive, but what I like about this is that it's really front loading the work. You dirty your kitchen one time, you make the food one time, you throw it in the freezer, and then you have it for weeks to come. Since I doubled the batch and put them in the freezer, these tortillas will last my family of 3 at least a month, probably more. So once everything is portioned and ready to go, it's time to roll them. And please don't judge me on my terrible rolling. This is why I call them flatbreads, not tortillas, because they are not round like a tortilla. Life is a series of choices and priorities, and what's really low on my priority list this day is a perfectly round tortilla. What's high on my priority list is having scratch-made food, having it readily available, and getting to school in time to pick up my child. So I roll these out in whatever shape they turn out. And then it's time to cook them. So just preheat a skillet. I prefer cast iron. You don't need oil in it, butter, or anything like that. You don't want to fry them. You basically just want to cook them on a hot skillet. And you can see also I scooted my turkey broth over because I have a favorite burner. No one tells you when you're young that by the time you're 41 like I am, you will have a favorite burner, but you do. And you will too if you're not there yet. But anyway, so you just put them in the skillet. When they start to bubble in the top like this, it's time to flip them. This is definitely the most labor-intensive part of my day. It does take a little bit of time to get these done, but it's a pretty quick process once you kind of get into your groove, and the tortillas only take about a minute or 2 to cook once they're in the skillet. But after that, you have a ton of tortillas. You can make tacos with them, burritos, flatbreads, enchiladas. I've even toasted them and used them for croutons. So you have a big batch of food that you get to enjoy and use in flexible ways for many meals to come. Before freezing, these will need to come to room temperature, so we'll let them chill here while we do some other stuff. I had forgotten to put flour on my beeswax wrap, so that took a little bit of time to clean up. But after cleaning this up, I still had plenty of time to make one more ingredient before I had to pick up my daughter from school, and that is Bechamel, the mother sauce, which is one of my all-time favorite things to use for flexible cooking, busy weeknights, and easy dinners. The recipe for this and everything else in the video will be in the description box below, but this is simply a combination of butter, flour, and I cannot emphasize this enough, warm milk. Using warm milk will change your mother sauce, your bechamel, from like okay to amazing. Cold milk will drop the temp and coagulate the butter, so warm milk keeps it really smooth. You just mix it together until it coats the back of a spoon, and then I used half of this for dinner that night, and then the other half I let cool in this pan, and I put it in the freezer. I heard you can freeze bechamel, and it turns out great. This is my first time trying it, so I'll let you know how it goes later. Even if you just multiply the recipe and keep it in the fridge for a few days, there's a lot you can do with it. I threw in some shredded cheddar and made a cheese sauce and put it in with noodles and some green onions. Here, I just put plain bechamel in with some rice, some leftover veggies, and leftover chicken and made a delicious casserole. So really, you can use it in plenty of versatile and flexible ways.
Since the time we started filming, which was, I'm gonna say about 8:45 or so, I made 32 tortillas. There's only 31 left. I ate one. I got turkey stock going, and I also made 2 batches of bechamel. And keep in mind that I'm also moving my camera around the entire time and getting things set up to record because I have like a pretty rudimentary setup around here. So that's a ton of stuff made in a really short period of time. If you're not filming it, my guess is you can probably get most of that done in an hour, maybe an hour and a half tops. And that's a ton of meals, a ton of ingredients, all from scratch that now you can either throw in the freezer, throw in the fridge, and use for the next few weeks or months to come.
I love to keep shredded cheese in bulk in my house. It prevents me from having to run to the store when I need shredded cheese. Cheese is delicious on everything. And I know that shredded cheese is probably like not blowing your mind right now, but that's almost the point. These things that we do to make our lives easier should be accessible in things that we already know and like to use. So I prefer to have fresh shredded cheese at home. I think it tastes better. I don't like the powder coating that they put on store-bought cheese. I shred it in a food processor, bag it up in a food saver, and throw it in the freezer, and I have it whenever I want. And on this day, what was really cool is I actually used the tortillas that I made earlier in the day and then the shredded cheese that I did that day and made quesadillas for lunch. And if you haven't put fermented green bell peppers in your quesadilla, you are missing out. These are peppers that I fermented earlier in the summer, and they were so good on my quesadilla.
So the last thing we need to do today before we wrap things up, well, I guess there's 2 things. 1, we're gonna make rice and bag it and freeze it. And 2, we gotta pack up the tortillas and we are done.
For years, when I was cooking in a pinch, I relied on Trader Joe's frozen rice, but really it's pretty expensive for just rice. So I've started freezing my own rice. I like to make about 5 meals worth of rice in the Instant Pot. You could use a stovetop if you prefer. I just like the Instant Pot because it's set it and forget it. When it's done, I portion it into 5 bags and throw them in the freezer. The one thing to remember here is for freezer rice, you want to undercook it slightly. So that way, when you toss it into soups or casseroles in a month or so, when it absorbs the liquid, it won't be overcooked. But while the Instant Pot is working for me and making the rice, it's a great opportunity to bag up the flatbreads. So I just layer them with flatbread, parchment paper, flatbread, parchment paper in a Ziploc bag, label it, and throw it in the freezer. The parchment paper will prevent them from sticking together, and you can just grab one whenever you want it. On days like this, when I'm trying to get a few kitchen projects done, I really like to layer them up. So while the dough is resting, I'm working in the garden and the turkey broth is cooking, or while the rice is cooking, I am packing up flatbreads. But eventually the rice will be done. So here I am just scooping the rice out onto a sheet of parchment paper. I recommend using both of your hands. My daughter really wanted to be held, so I'd had to spoon it out. Be a lot faster if you could just dump the rice onto a sheet of parchment paper. A cookie sheet would also work just fine, but you just want to let the rice completely cool and get slightly dry before bagging it up and freezing it. And at long last, the bone broth is ready to be strained. Sometimes I freeze the broth. This time I actually just put all of it in the fridge, and I used it later in the week to make the most delicious soup. I actually used frozen rice in this soup, some home canned chicken, and leftover veggies. And just like that, I have a freezer full of ingredients that I can use for meals to come over the coming days, weeks, and even months. Scratch-made, home-cooked food made easy that doesn't take up a ton of space in the freezer or in the pantry. I hope this inspires you to prepare ahead the ingredients that you love to use to make your days a little bit easier. Thank you so much for tuning into my YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and to like this video, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.